we look at this fascinating silver medal. This medal was found by a worker on the guest's great-grandfather's farm. He traded it for 3 hogs from her great-grandfather. This medal is an authentic 1809 James Madison Indian Peace Medal. It's made of solid silver.
These were minted at the U.S. Mint in Philadelphia and designed by a German immigrant named John Reich, who was the assistant engraver of the U.S. Mint. He also designed a lot of very famous coins.
These medals were given out to representatives of the U.S. government to give to Indian chiefs throughout the Missouri and Mississippi River valleys. They were usually minted in 3 sizes: a 2-inch, a 2.5-inch, and a 3-inch.
And they were given out in importance order, the 3-inch to the most important Indian chiefs, the 2.5-inch, which you have here, to slightly lesser chiefs, and then the 2-inch to maybe even lesser.
Okay.
The front of the medal shows the bust of President Madison. It's inscribed with his name and title, and it dates to around 1809.
Here on the back side of the medal, we have peace and friendship, and it shows a U.S. Army cavalry cuffed hand shaking a bare-wristed hand, so presumably that of an American Indian.
Right.
And above that is the crossed tomahawk and peace pipe.
They commonly lacked suspension loops, but they were often created as the Indians liked wearing them.
These were perceived as very important by American Indians and often traded amongst themselves and sought after even within their communities.
Oh, okay.
This lovely medal is valued at about...
The question, what's the value? If this were to come up at auction, I would expect it to sell for between $20,000 and $30,000.
Wow. Wow.
This pocket watch belonged to William McKinley, the 25th President of the United States. It's a Hampton from the Duber-Hampton Watch Company of Canton, Ohio. This watch was presented to him during his tenure as the governor of Ohio. Made from 18-karat gold, this watch showcases detailed floral engravings, highlighting the artistry of the time. This is a great American collectible watch that served as a token of appreciation and admiration.
What we got here is a crossover collectible. Not only would watch people go crazy for this, and it's a great American collectible watch, it's a politically important piece of Americana and American history.
At appraisal, this watch is valued at...
This watch should bring easily $30,000 to $35,000.
Next up is this presentation sword and Lincoln-signed appointment certificate. These pieces belong to the guest's great-great-grandfather, who was the consul of Bavaria. The sword was presented by the Philadelphia Flying Artillery to its founder, the guest relative, as a token of great esteem. It was presented at the time by the governor of Pennsylvania and Simon Cameron, Lincoln's first Secretary of War.
It's got a beautiful presentation on the front where it was presented by his men to General Max Einstein.
Right.
Wonderful presentation.
The sword was made by the Ames Manufacturing Company in Chicopee, Massachusetts. It has the Ames mark on the back of the scabbard.
This is pretty much the pinnacle of an Ames sword. Beautifully executed. It has the original silver handle with beautiful floral and geometric patterns on the grip.
The appointment certificate mentions how he became the consul of the King of Bavaria.
And what's interesting about this is not only is it an important piece of paper of history, it's also important because of who it's signed by.
This one has a full ink signature all over his hand, deep colors, and no fading.
It's a beautiful signature. And if you notice, it's dated in 1861. That's early in Lincoln's presidency.
The appraiser provides an insurance value on them.
It's not a sword you'd ever decide to sell.
Right.
So I'd insure it for $15,000. And the appointment with the good, clear signatures is something you would need to insure for around $5,000.
Okay, that's good to know.
Fantastic.
This piece was bought in a shop in Evanston, Illinois in 1968 by the guest and her husband. They paid about $200 for it. This is an 1860 Republican presidential campaign chart. This chart reflects the campaign strategies of the Republican Party for Lincoln to emerge victorious in the election. This, however, wasn't a campaign poster, but a commercial poster. It was done by a New York publisher known as H.H. Lloyd.
He also did one for the Democrats, so he wasn't particularly politically inclined, he was commercially inclined.
One of the main campaign points of the Republican Party then was to stop the spread of slavery to the American West. This chart showcases the coverage on its map. This makes it of historic interest.
So all the people against the spread of slavery were horrified, and that's what created the Republican Party. And this map was showing that graphically and saying to the people against the spread of slavery, look, if we don't elect Lincoln.
The appraiser provides information on valuing prints.
What makes prints valuable is they're connected to the time. Well, you can't get any more connected than a poster issued during the campaign.
These prints are quite rare, as probably under 100 of them will be available in decent shape. This chart, which is in very good condition, is valued at about...
In a retail shop, I would expect this to have a value of about $14,000.
I had no idea.
Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Money for it's as good as you get with historic prints.
That's so nice.
This item was found in the guest grandmother's estate. It belonged to her grandmother's grandfather, who was a topographical engineer in the Army and also friends with Abraham Lincoln. When he died, Lincoln was present at his funeral as a friend. This item, however, poses a mystery as to how it ended with her family. It is a presidential pardon signed by Lincoln in 1861 for prisoner Charles de Villiers for good behavior and also having no prior run-ins with the law.
President Lincoln granted him a pardon. He was sentenced originally to 18 months in prison and served 6 months of that prison sentence.
The presidential seal is seen easily at the back. It is entirely written in secretarial hand. It has the authentic hand-signed signature of President Lincoln and the Secretary of State witnessing the pardon.
It's just a living, breathing piece of our American history.
This item is valued at...
would be at retail worth between $12,000 to $15,000.
Wow, that's great.
Did you think it would be worth this much? Let us know in the comments. Another Roosevelt item makes the list. This time it belongs to the other Roosevelt president, Franklin D. Roosevelt. This archive was found in a box of old photographs bought by the guest and her mother at an estate sale. They paid $5 for the box. These archives cover a large span of Roosevelt's life and career, from the 1920s before his election to the White House. These letters were all written to a man named John S. Cohen, who was a pressman and the editor and publisher of the Atlanta Journal at that time. This relationship between Roosevelt and Cohen was of great interest to Roosevelt because by Cohen's position, his ambition could be passed easily to the masses.
So we start off in the 20s, and Roosevelt's talking here about wanting to write an editorial for the paper. Then we follow Roosevelt into the late 20s, into 28, because he was, of course, going to Warm Springs, Georgia.
Here's an invitation to his inauguration that was sent to Cohen.
Later, in 1932, during the presidential election, there was a vacancy in the Georgia seat of the Senate, and Cohen became the United States Senator for Georgia.
Another great position for Roosevelt to utilize. Finally, we see Roosevelt in the White House in 1933. These items as an archive, with a personal touch and a large period, are great among collectors. They are valued at $20,000 to $30,000. These letters are like a time capsule from the past. The guest grandmother, who owned this collection, was a personal friend of the Kennedys. The statements, JFK's most important communication to me, shows a sentimental value to the letter. These letters offer individuals a unique glimpse into the personal and professional exchanges that shaped Kennedy's legacy. It's important to note that handwritten letters hold more value than typed ones with just a signature. JFK writes a lengthy and thoughtful reply to his speech about America's anti-colonial policy, focusing on Algeria. This letter from JFK is called a TLS, that is, a typed letter signed.
This letter is, as we call it, a TLS, a typed letter signed, and often the presidential letters were done with auto pen.
The appraiser values these personalized letters at...
So a conservative auction estimate, $15,000 to $20,000 for the whole archive.
Well, it's exciting to hear and to know.
We look at this Theodore Roosevelt signed photo and gifted watch. These items belong to the guest grandfather, whose first wife was a cousin to Theodore Roosevelt. Her name was Christine Keene Roosevelt,
And she is a remarkable figure. She was a debutante the season of 1902, which was famous because 5 Roosevelt cousins came out that year, including Alice Roosevelt, Theodore's oldest daughter.
This is a photograph of Theodore and his 4 sons, Theodore Jr., Archibald, Quentin, and Kermit, which was taken in 1904. This other signature belonged to the photographer, who signed and dated it. This lovely pocket watch was given by Theodore to Christine. It has her initials engraved on the outside. The watch is a 14-karat gold pocket watch by American Waltham. The appraiser values the items at about...
So it's very rare to find the family photograph with signatures of the children as well as the father. I would say that at auction, I would list it between $10,000 and $15,000. By itself, it's probably a $300 watch, but with the association, we would list it at $1,000 to $1,500.
Wonderful.
This is not your ordinary school picture day snapshot, folks. The guest acquired this portrait about 20 years ago at an estate sale for $40. This is an ironstone picture of Teddy Roosevelt, measuring approximately 14 by 11 inches. It was photographed by Edward Curtis, who was friends with Roosevelt.
It is by Edward Curtis. Curtis and Roosevelt were friends. Curtis had actually photographed Roosevelt and his children in New York in 1904.
Curtis's masterful use of light and shadow highlights Roosevelt's commanding presence as a visionary statesman. The portrait conveys the Rough Rider spirit that people associate with Teddy Roosevelt.
This portrait really conveys the charisma and the energy and the kind of spirit,
the kind of guy
the Rough
he was.
Rider spirit that people associate with Teddy Roosevelt, and that's the artistry of Curtis.
The previous auction of this item fetched nearly $18,000 due to its authentic signature. The appraiser values this collection between...
Auction estimate would be in the $10,000 to $15,000 price range.
Oh my, no, I didn't have any clue. Wow.
Streets lined with people, all sober, holding a banner to honor the memory of Abraham Lincoln. The guest was gifted this memorabilia by his wife for Christmas. The words, "Uncle Abe, we will not forget you," are largely written on the banner.
Uncle Abe, we will not forget you. From the smallest town to the biggest city, there were demonstrations, parades of mourning.
The torch on the banner was especially useful during nighttime marches. These Lincoln memorial items hold significant value like his campaign items. There are 2 sides to the banner, each with a different inscription. This is a truly unique item with its original shaft and 2-sided sign, which greatly enhances its significance. At auction, this piece of history is valued at...
I were to put this in an auction of historical collectibles, I would think that this would be valued at somewhere between $15,000 and $25,000.
Oh my goodness.